It's great we have the tall guy here to draw the attention of everyone. Let me first of all welcome all of you, our distinguished guests here tonight to this VIP reception for the launch of CinemAsia. In particular, I'd like to welcome some of the officers from the Consul General of Japan, the Consulate of Japan here in Toronto. I'd like to also welcome and to thank Madam Zhu, who is the Consul General from China here in Toronto. I'd also like to welcome Mr. Masayuki Suzuki, who's back there, who's the director of the Japan Foundation. Has been a wonderful supporter of not only Real Asian Film Festival, but also the Asian Institute here at the University of Toronto. And I'd also like to extend a very warm thanks and welcome to our Dean, Faculty of Arts and Science, Professor Merritt Gertler, as well as David Klausner, hiding in the back there by the bar, the Vice Dean of Interdisciplinary Studies. I don't know, does interdisciplinary studies lend itself to hanging out in bars? Is that
we do our best work in bars.
Is that what creates the expansiveness of
I don't recall that being in the job description.
I'd like to welcome all of you tonight to this kickoff event, this inaugural event of CinemAsia called Celebrating Sabu. On behalf of the Asian Institute and myself as well. For those of you who don't know, the Asian Institute is here, part of the Munk Center for International Studies. Though a very young institute, it is home to about 50 core faculty researchers and over 100 affiliated researchers from around the Toronto and Southern Ontario region, which makes it the largest and I think also the most productive Asian Studies Center here in Canada, and ranks amongst the most productive in North America as well. My name is Joe Wong. I'm a professor of political science. I spend most of my time writing about politics, but I spend part of my time also as a director of the Innis. This is a very special opportunity for me to welcome all of you. One of the most important missions, aside from world-class research and innovative teaching here at the Asian Institute, of course, is connecting with the community. And we at the Asian Institute over the past several years have been trying to think of ways in which we can better engage the community. And the best idea that came forward, and one that I'm thrilled that we were able to pursue, of course, is film. I have to admit that when the idea was first presented to me, I was partly motivated by the fact that I would get to meet famous directors. I would get swag and lead a celebrity life. But more importantly, film, of course, is a medium that allows us to do precisely the work we do here at the Asian Institute, which is multidisciplinary work. And more importantly, the format that we are introducing tonight, CinemAsia, which is where essentially the university puts together panels and events such as this, featuring, for instance, my colleague, Professor Eric Cassidy, will be giving a talk tonight. It allows us to engage with the community. Because, after all, we know, particularly in this day and age with the financial crisis, the most important currency is maybe not cash, although it probably is in the United States right now, the banking sector, but it's ideas. And the university is about generating ideas. Now, Professor Gertler here, of course, is one of the foremost scholars of innovation and theories of innovation. He can tell us that innovation, intellectual innovation and ideas comes from interconnectivity. And so even though I'm speaking here on behalf of the Asian Institute, I'm really speaking on behalf of the sort of interconnections that we've been able to put together in putting together this event. Interconnectivities within the university, our colleagues in the Cinema Studies Institute, our colleagues in comparative literature, our colleagues in the cognitive departments in the social sciences and the humanities. But most importantly, the connections that we've been able to forge with the community. And most importantly of that is the connection we've been able to forge with the Real Asian International Film Festival. As the executive director, Deanna Wong, of the Real Asian Film Festival. It's really an honor for us to be able to partner up with Real Asian this year, and we assume and we presume and we anticipate that this partnership will be a long-standing one. In order for us to have an opportunity to do what we do best, but also to create the sorts of connections into the broader community the Real Asian Film Festival has been able to forge before us. So I would like to first of all thank, on behalf of the Asian Institute, the University of Toronto, Deanna Wong and the Real Asian International Film Festival for giving us the honor of being a partner in this. I'd also like to thank some very important people. I can't name them all. I'd like to thank the organizing committee who worked tirelessly over the past year in putting together this event. I'd like to thank Tobin Fine Foods, who is catering this event for free. Not for you, for us. But I wanted to nonetheless highlight the wonderful contributions that Tobin has been able to make for us. The wonderful graphic designer we have, Leonard Wyma. And most importantly, and this is one of the things that always pains me to do at VIP reception, because you are all much more resourced than I want to thank our Institute manager, Eileen Lamb. Well, I don't know where Eileen is. I don't thank her enough. Eileen Lamb, all of you will have received an email from, a phone call from, a cajoling from, something of that nature. She is the lifeblood of the Asian Institute. She is really the person behind putting together this entire event. Let me close by saying just a few words about this event tonight. You might recall last year we did an event on Hong Kong Hong Kong films, which was received very well. The academic community, the broader community industry, the film community as well. What we wanted to do was we wanted to expand our cultural geographical reach and explore Japan. In large part because Japan in many ways, with the rise of China, has become somewhat forgotten. When I look through job application files, when I look through the new hirings, this is one of the sad realities. Now, this is not what we do here at the Asian Institute. And I'm very happy to say, particularly as I look through job files for a job we're looking for, a candidate we're looking for now, Japan Studies is extremely lively, extremely vibrant. We've moved beyond the political economic fascination of the Japanese economic miracle, and we're now beginning to really look at the contributions that Japan is making on the cultural front, the intellectual front, globally. And we thought it imperative that we launch CinemAsia by featuring Japan, and indeed as a way of growing Japan Studies here at the Asian Institute. And again, I want to just reiterate, growing Japan Studies here at the Asian Institute not only means hiring faculty, bringing in students, but also making very important connections to the community. So let me close by thanking then all of you for coming here tonight. I look forward to seeing you at the screening, and even more importantly, I look forward to seeing you all at the post-screening party. If you don't know yet, the Asian Institute throws the best parties around. So thank you all again, and welcome. Great pleasure to introduce to you my colleague, my boss, the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Science, Wolverine Professor of Geography, Merrick Early. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I will be brief because I know you want to get back to that fantastic food and those beverages that are available. I'm really delighted to be here tonight to help launch CinemAsia, which is a celebration of Asian film offered both by U of T's Asian Institute and the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival. Last year, as Joe just mentioned, U of T's Asian Institute ran the inaugural film event focusing on cinema from Hong Kong. And it was indeed a great success. It gained critical acclaim from those who know, from people in the industry, from academics, and indeed from the broader community. This year, as Joe has just said, the focus is now on Japan, including films by the critically acclaimed director Sabu. So the films and the panels over the next few days really represent a very impressive program, and those who are able to attend, I think, are in for a real treat. I'd also, though, like to take a minute to acknowledge Professor Wong, Director of the Asian Institute. As Joe said, the Asian Institute is a relatively new entity here at U of T. It was created to bring scholars together from across a variety of different disciplines who are linked together by their interest in all things Asian, in their research and in their teaching. And as Joe has described, it really has been very successful in a very short period of time in creating this kind of interdisciplinary space for interaction and debate and discussion and education. So it is clearly, it's way past takeoff. It's reached cruising altitude. It's punching way above its weight, and we love to see this, and we'll certainly do all we can within our straitened circumstances to make sure that it continues to achieve such great successes. And I think it's important to recognize that one of the reasons for this success is because Joe has been so focused and effective in working to create a bridge between U of T and the broader community, as he has said. And I think CinemAsia, the event that we're celebrating here this evening, is a wonderful example of exactly that. So the university also appreciates the many supporters of this event that are too numerous to mention. They certainly also make it possible for the Asian Institute to offer this exciting program. So let me conclude by congratulating all of those involved in this terrific initiative, and also by offering my best wishes for a wonderful celebration of Japanese film. Thanks very much.
Reintroduce to you Deanna Wong, who's the Executive Director of the Real Asian Film Festival, and our partner and really our taskmaster in teaching us how to put one of these things on.
Hi everybody, good evening. I didn't realize we were competing with the Asian Institute for throwing the best parties around. But the Real Asian is a 12-year-old film festival, and I'm really proud and honored to be here tonight to introduce the evening's program. Over the years, Real Asian has evolved from being a showcase for contemporary independent films by Asian North American directors to one that now includes a significant international component. But we've long recognized the importance of showing older works by auteurs that have come before us. Last year, for instance, Real Asian worked with the Japan Foundation and the Department of Film at York University to present a program of shorts by the Japanese experimental master Oe Masanori. And this program was very well received, and we were lucky to have such great support from the Japan Foundation, Mr. Suzuki and Professor Hayashi, who I expect to be here tonight. So when the Asian Institute approached us about the possibility of further expanding this type of programming to include panels and lectures, we jumped at this chance. The result is CinemAsia and this year's mini retrospective of another groundbreaking filmmaker, Japanese director, Sabu. So I'd like to thank Professor Wong and Eileen Lam and the entire organizing committee. I'm reluctant to name a few, but but I'd like to acknowledge Professor Cass and Professor Tessa, Alice Shi, Jeffrey Little, and Innis for their contributions to this, for helping us making it work. Now it's hard to believe, but Real Asian doesn't officially begin until tomorrow with our opening night film, The Drummer. I now have the privilege of introducing to you the director, Kenneth B. Real Asian and Canada have both had a long relationship with Kenneth. Although he's lived in Hong Kong for many years, he actually graduated from Brock University. And Real Asian showed his first feature, A Small Miracle, in 2001. Back then, we didn't have the budget to fly him here, and we didn't even invite him to attend a screening. But this year, with the generous support of the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office, we're lucky to have him here with us tonight.
The last time I was here, it was about 11 years ago, and it was 1997, which was after the handover, and I don't know why I came back, I don't remember. But I'm glad to see nothing has changed. I still recognize the streets. But 11 years flew by, and I'm really happy to be here. I wish there was like some kind of Asian studies when I was here. My education in Canada has mostly been an Anglo-Saxon experience, but with the Asian Institute and with all the interconnectivity that I see here tonight, I'm very happy because when I went to school in England when I was 13 years old, this is a long time ago, all the kids in the English boarding school would ask me, so where is Hong Kong? And now I don't know whether I've grown or the world has grown, but everybody knows where Hong Kong is. Everybody knows what Hong Kong films are about, and films are really the vehicle for promoting culture. So I'm very happy to be here and to be with you all for Hope you come to the movie tomorrow night. Okay, there's a great movie tonight. Sabu is my, I love Sabu. I wish he was here so I could meet him, but after tonight, tomorrow is another good one.
Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the food and wine. Thank you. That's great. Very nice work. You know, it's amazing how vision studies we've done support of the mainstream.
Welcome to Sabu Soiree, the screening of Monday by Tanaka Hiroyuki, or more commonly known as Sabu. こんばんは、皆様ようこそ。今夜のサブスワレーに出席していただきましてどうもありがとうございます。My name is Ito Peng, and I am the director of the David Chu program in Asia Pacific Studies at Asian Institute. I have the honor and the privilege to serve as the MC tonight for this event. Tonight we're celebrating the Toronto premiere of Sabu's critically acclaimed film Monday, the winner of the 2000 Don Quixote Prize and Fipreschi Prize at the Berlin International Film Festival. In a few moments, I would like to introduce you three speakers: Professor Joseph Wang, Miss Diana Wang, no relations, and Professor Bart Testa, who will introduce the film and the importance of tonight's event. But before that, I would like to just simply say that this screening is not only an occasion for us to introduce and highlight the contemporary Japanese cinematic art, but it is also to debut CinemAsia. This is a new lineup of film events that we are organizing at the Asian Institute at the University of Toronto. This year, we're launching the event in collaboration with the Rio Asian International Film Festival, a collaboration which we hope will establish our ongoing and long-term engagement with each other. Indeed, our engagement with the Rio Asian International Film Festival actually began last year when we co-sponsored a highly successful Hong Kong Film Festival. That experience taught us that not only were we able to work well with each other, but that we actually shared in common similar kind of artistic and intellectual excitement and curiosity through cinema art. CinemAsia is therefore a product of our positive experience and partnership. And I wish and we hope that this will continue to grow. So tonight's event is not only an occasion for us to present the Toronto premiere of Monday, but also for us to celebrate the launching of the CinemAsia and our partnership with the Rio Asian International Festival and other community partners. Now, I have been told that the job of a really good MC is to open the event, introduce speakers, and just step out of the stage. So I'll do exactly that. I would like to now introduce you my colleague and friend, and sometimes my boss, Professor Joseph Wang, the director of Asian Institute, who really doesn't need introduction. Joe?
Thank you, Ito, for that very kind introduction. This is what happens when you're the director of the Asian Institute and you get to pick the MC. You can be assured of kind comments. As the director of the Asian Institute, I'd like to extend, on behalf of the Asian Institute, a warm welcome to all of you here tonight for this inaugural event for CinemAsia, and to also celebrate a fantastic director of Japanese film. Last year was the first foray on the part of the Asian Institute into the world of film. We're academics, and we tend to make ourselves as inaccessible as possible. But we found that the medium of film was a way in which we could bring the university closer to the community. I was really supportive of this from the very beginning, as I said at the reception earlier on, because it was a great way for me to meet celebrities and directors, and we are filled with, we are graced with the honor of having celebrities and directors in the audience tonight. And most importantly, it's an opportunity for the university to bring itself closer to the community, the people that matter. It allows us the opportunity And tonight you'll have the pleasure, and we'll all have the pleasure of hearing my colleague, Professor Eric Kasdan, give a speak. It gives us the opportunity to illuminate. But most importantly, it gives us the opportunity to engage in dialogue and to learn through dialogue. The university is a place of knowledge creation. It's a place of ideas and innovation. And ideas and innovation only come through learning from one another. That is the basis of CinemAsia. We are very excited to be launching it tonight. And that is also the motivation behind our partnership with the Real Asian International Film Festival. It's really a pleasure and an honor for us that they have agreed to work with us, lending us their expertise, and also putting on this fantastic program. We share the same mission, and we hope through our partnership we will broaden that mission. So again, welcome. Enjoy the film. Enjoy the conversation afterwards with Professor Kasdan. And above all else, enjoy the party after that. Thank you again.
Thank you, Joe. I think one of the nicest things about being director at the Asian Institute is that sometimes we could pretend that we are somebody else and being able to talk about films and art and things like that. It's a great way for us to kind of escape from our regular, more full-time job as actually academics and researchers. For example, Professor Wong works in an area very similar to mine, which is comparative welfare stage. Now, how many people will show up in comparative welfare stage talk? I think it's the cinema that brings everybody together. This time, I would like to introduce Ms. Diana Wong, the director of Real Asian International Film Festival, and I would love to hear more about the film from you.
Thank you, Professor Peng. Thank you, everyone. As was mentioned, I'm Deanna Wong, the Executive Director of the Toronto Real Asian International Film Festival, and I'm really happy to see all of you here tonight. I'd like to start out by thanking Professor Wong and the Asian Institute for being so supportive of this program. We're really excited to be working together with them. Real Asian is a 12-year-old festival, and we showcase the best in contemporary independent work by Asian filmmakers from all over the world. What this new partnership allows us to do is to present a mini retrospective. And this time we're starting with the work of the innovative Japanese filmmaker Sabu. So I'd like to, again, to thank the Asian Institute, because this is something that we try to do every year, but we find it hard to fit in to our 5-day time frame. So we're starting a day early. Our film festival actually begins tomorrow night at the Bloor with the Toronto premiere of the film, Hong Kong film, The Drummer, with director Kenneth B, who's here in Toronto and will be at the screening tomorrow night. But there's lots more. We close with another Japanese film called Adrift in Tokyo on Sunday night, also at the Bloor, and by director Satoshi Miki. So I invite you to visit our website at realasian.com, and we do also have program guides, I think out there and perhaps out there somewhere. Please try to find one and pick one up and join us. And again, enjoy the film.
Thank you very much, Diana. And finally, last but not least, I would like to ask Professor Bart Tester, a professor of the Cinema Studies Institute here at the University of Toronto, to give us a brief introduction of the film that we'll be watching shortly. I should also say that after the introduction by Professor Tester, we will start the film, and after the film is over, I think Professor Tester will come back and take on the MC work. Thank you.
Thank you. I will, in fact, be extremely brief. I teach in the Cinema Studies Institute here, and I would like to thank you for coming out, and I would like to welcome you to Innis Town Hall, the place where we're now sitting so comfortably. This event serves as a prelude and a companion to the Real Asian International Film Festival. And as been mentioned, it officially starts tomorrow night with The Drummer, directed by Kenneth B., who I believe is in the room. Following the screening, there'll be a very, very short break, just enough time for the credits to roll, the lights to come out, for those of you who aren't going to stay for the rest of the evening. But then very promptly, I will in fact come back in order to introduce Eric Kasdan, who'll be giving a talk on Sabu. But for now, let me say that Sabu's birth name was Hiroyuki Tanaka. He didn't like this name for his career as an actor. He thought Tanaka was way too generic. And so when he started acting at 20, he took on the name of one of his characters, and that's how he came to be called Sabu. He was born in 1964, and as a performer, he came to be associated with directors like Takahashi Miike and Kirishiro Kurosawa, with his important starring role as lead in Otomo's World Department Horror. So he had a pretty successful career, but eventually he got annoyed by the carelessness of the directors who were running the productions in which he was involved, and he said, well, I think I'll just have to write and direct my own films. So 10 years into his acting career, at 30 years old, Sabu began to direct with Dangang Runner, which is also known as Non-Stop, in 1996. With each film, his reputation in Japan and internationally has risen steadily to the present. And this is the fourth film we're going to see that he's made. Monday was made in the year 2000. Before I leave, I want to add that in addition to this screening, another Sabu film, The Blessing Bell, which was made in 2002, will screen here in Innis Town Hall on Friday, 2:30 p.m. Okay? Thank you.
And for the talk to work, we had to laugh together, which we did. So I now consider myself 1 for 1. And if I were smart, I'd probably stop and declare victory. But I'm not going to do that because, like laughter, thinking, lecturing has the same certain type of uncontrollability, unstoppability, even death drive to it. But let me begin by saying that I've changed my title from Fits of Laughter to Counting by Laughter, and usually that's not important, but in this case it's really important. Because what I'm going to do is draw on 5 key moments of laughter in the film, and I'm going to coordinate them with 5 numbers. Each number itself will be coordinated with a different form of social relations. And I'm going to explore these modes and these numbers and these modes of social relations in terms of a certain mathematics, one that's based on the principle of laughter. So if I have, if counting by laughter should, if I have my numbers right, add up to a few concluding remarks about Japan, about film, and about the world. So let's begin, and as usual, we begin with the number 1. Number 1, represented by the salaryman, laughing by himself alone when he's meeting with his girlfriend at the cafe. This is the laughter of the one, separate, isolated, alienated, apoplectic laughter. Laughter that distances and does not communicate. The laughter of the loner, the hysteric, the madman, the crackpot, who no longer capable of relating to others, cracks up, free falls irretrievably down into his own schizoid fantasy world. In this case, it's how the salaryman, I'll call him Takagi from now on, expresses the trauma he just witnessed, the trauma, of course, of the exploding corpse, in the face of his narcissistic girlfriend who demands what? Distraction, repression, forgetfulness, however much you can quite impressively remember all the districts of Tokyo. The trauma of the corpse is the trauma of the unbelievable, or the trauma of the uncommunicable. It's the literalization of that you're not going to believe this moment. Yes, you are quite literally not going to be able to believe this, and I, quite literally, am not going to be able to communicate this. This gap, this lack that laughter allegorizes, is built right into our beings and terrifying, precisely because it makes us only too aware of our isolation. But this is not simply an existential horror. this is also a political one. For if one cannot communicate, represent, and thus join with others, then one cannot challenge injustice, one cannot enact social change. For it's only through collective action that such change is possible. The exploding corpse, therefore, is not just the trauma that cannot be communicated, but it also alludes to the film's genre. Monday, you see, is a horror film. If by horror we understand, as did Kurtz in Conrad's Heart of Darkness, that horror has a face, and we must make a friend of horror, or at least we must laugh at it. And we must find someone to laugh with. In this case, it's not his girlfriend, rather it's his newfound fortune-telling, palm-reading friend he meets at the bar. And this then takes us to the number two. Number two, the two laughing at the bar. This is the laughter of the two, coupled, obsessive, convulsive, contagious, infectious, unstoppable. A laughing spell that builds for nearly 6 minutes of cinematic time. Here, the bodies are joined by the hand and by the prophetic future. There's something sensual and private about the two, a pact against the world, a Thelma and Louise embrace, double suicide. The laughter of the two must be cut off from others. It's a secret that's betrayed the moment it's shared with anyone else. The partner in this pair is a lover, or sometimes, as in the case of Monday, a stranger. And together they must protect against the incursions of the world. The boisterous, obnoxious, garrulous laughter in the bar acts as a fortress against a world that must be held at bay. For like the one, the two are also alone, separate, isolated, lacking. And in Monday, this too is interrupted by the woman in white, by heterosexual desire, by the third, which takes us to the number three. The salaryman with the woman in white and her man, the Yakuza boss. Here, one laughs in order to save one's own life. At the end of a gun laughter, murderous laughter, oppositional, extortionist, vengeful, hair-triggeringly dangerous laughter, this is the logic of the three, in which the one is against the two against the one, the two, and the three, playing each position in turn. In this mode, and despite the circularity, the third is always sacrificed by self-defense, by jealousy, by a big gun going off accidentally. Something always manages to kick the three back into its most basic elements, the two and then the one. In this case, it's the killing of the Yakuza boss. Sometimes, however, the dissolution of the three moves in the other direction, as is also the case in Monday, when the three turns into the four, number four, the group laughter at the end. The laughter of the four, of the collective, the unification of the one, the two, and the three, all different groups, contradictory, antinomial, structurally opposed terms, media, politicians, citizens, police. This is a utopian moment. Yes, everyone drops their weapons, enters into a hat-flinging, shoulder-slapping, belly-aching, group-hugging, slow-motion celebration. But no one who knows the history of Japan can fully smile at such a sweet scene, especially when remembering Japan's militarist past, in which a similar unanimity formed while dissent was snuffed out. Difference sacrificed in the name of the emperor. And so the four takes us back to the one, not the isolated individual, but now the fascist collective, at least as it's indelibly imprinted on the history of modern Japan. No doubt that by this time you are thinking, what a sad and pathetic mathematics you've signed up for. Everything adds up to nothing, but I haven't finished counting, for there's one more number that we need to explore. And this number's wild, so much so that it reverses the value of everything, so that now the one is about courage, the two about love, the three about tolerance, and the four about inclusivity. But before I introduce this wild card, I want to show you a clip of the four numbers already established and how they are portrayed visually by Sabu and in relation to each other. quite a number, but not quite nothing. And yes, the zero is us, our laughter. And now the task is to argue for how our laughter in a different place, at a different time than Monday, Monday's times and places, is inextricably connected to Monday, without which the movie would not exist. Only with the introduction of zero can a structure be constituted. And only with the introduction of a structure can we imagine, however impossibly, a more progressive form of social relations that exceeds this very structure. A form that trumps the others, the one, the two, the three, and the four. Zero was invented in India and was originally the name for not moving a bead on an abacus. If it were not for zero, the numbers 205 and 25 would be indistinguishable. Zero in Sanskrit is the same as the word for the Buddhist concept of emptiness, shunyata. But the Buddhist nothing, or ma in Japanese aesthetics, the gap, the difference, the negative space, the structuring absence, the interstitial, is not nothing, but neither is it something. Indeed, it's precisely when we reach this paradoxical nothing something when things get interesting, even laughable. And we might want to remember at this point that it's Hote in Japanese, the laughing Buddha, the one you might know from the statue of the obese Buddha holding his belly and laughing, who's regarded as the incarnation of the Bodhisattva who will be Maitreya, or the future Buddha, once the teachings of the current Gautama Buddha are completely forgotten. Laughter in this legend, therefore, prophesizes a future event that marks radical change and is linked to forgetting, not too far away from the stuff of Monday, but now I'm getting ahead of myself. This nothing something is not unlike what we sometimes call a relation. It's the structuring absence that gives meaning to all of the positive elements that make up our lives. And when pushed to its limit, deconstructs meaning itself, slapping us with the unbearable truth that meaning itself only exists insofar that we desire it. This emptiness or nothingness, this relation, is a floating signifier that structures being. When we move from Buddhist philosophy to film art, relation turns into the concept and practice of editing and narrative transition, the cinematic technique that mediates one shot with the next and one scene with the next. Let's think about what I want to do is think about the edits and transitions that Sabu uses with an eye on how he moves us from number to number. The first cut, you'll remember, was at the funeral, and it's when that takes us to the funeral. It's when Takagi is in his hotel room, he reaches for some cigarettes, and he accidentally finds those purification salts that triggers his memory, and that takes us to the exploding corpse. We go to the one in a cafe when Takagi is back in the hotel room, and he is checking the newspaper, realizes it's not Saturday or Sunday, but it's Monday. He looks into his coat pocket again and finds his date book, where he then sees the picture of his girlfriend and himself, and this takes us to the number one, to the cafe. The next scene, which takes us to the two, is when Takagi is once again in the hotel room, and there's some faint, incomprehensible whines that seem to be heard coming out of his mouth. This then immediately takes us to the bar scene, and where we see his palm-reading friend, and he too is muttering some almost incomprehensible sayings. In Japanese, he's saying "dameda, dameda." It's hopeless. It's just hopeless. So that takes us to the two. Of course, when we move from the two to the three, it is by way of what I think has to be one of the great moments in all of cinema, the peeing scene, a tour de force of rhythm and control. And it's the name card, the meishi, that's on the bottom of his foot, or on his shoe rather, that takes us, together with him accidentally discovering these shotgun shells in his suit pocket, that takes us then from the three to the killing spree, the four, and then the collective itself. Each transition, therefore, comes by way of the body. Signs that fall off of the body, that slip from it, that stick to it, that are discovered on it, and that flow out of it. It's the body, therefore, that triggers the mind, the remembering, and the transitions. And I just want to show you a clip of these edited together to make this point. that separates each number, each transition, is held open so that the film can be viewed as a series of gags, separate skits, edited together only by the laughter that jumps the space in between the episodes. In this case, it's the laughter that holds the film together, that produces a logic of relation, less on meaning and more on bodily intensities. And here, you might want to remember that Japanese film editing was most interestingly theorized and practiced in the pre-war moment, in particular in the 1930s by a filmmaker named Kame Fumio. Kame was interested in painting, wanted to go to the Soviet Union in the late 20s, did, but was then caught up in the film enthusiasm at the time. He moved to Leningrad, where he went to study with Sergei Eisenstein and Ziga Vertov. When he returned to Japan in the early 30s and started making film in the mid-1930s, he did so not only influenced by his foreign teachers, but also by the great Japanese poetic form of haiku. And even though Eisenstein is sometimes credited with making some of the connections between editing, cinematography, and Japanese aesthetics, it's really Kame who wrote the most interesting works and then actually worked them out in his own films in the 1930s. In haiku, it's the listener or the reader who moves from the abstract to the concrete, from the sublime to the everyday, from the elevated to the vulgar, through space, through time, by way of the emptiness that separates out the stanzas, the 5, 7, 5. In this way, these gaps, these emptinesses, function like short circuits rather than rational pathways. Kame is most famous then for making these wartime documentaries in the late 30s in Shanghai and Manchuria. We're watching some of them in my class, in fact, this month, in which he tries to separate out the shots, one shot from the other, and according to Kame, this was the way to activate a critical viewer. And you can imagine how high the stakes were for someone in Japan making a documentary in the late 1930s. By this time, the Empire Project is in full swing, and there's very little room to maneuver discursively. So this was a cinematic way of trying to break open some space, which is to produce an emptiness between shot A and shot B. Sabu does something similar, I think, less on the space between the shots and more on the space between scenes. Now, I'll say more about that in a bit, but I can just reference one other Japanese cultural tradition, and that would be the theater. In Kyogen, which is always linked with the No theater. The No, you might know, is quite highly formalized, symbolic, solemn type of theater that it takes place over a long period of time, plays with time, bends it, slows it down, quickens it up. So there'll always be, usually in a No performance, about one No act, let's say it goes for 2 or 3 hours, and then a Kyogen. A Kyogen will be 15 minutes, a half hour, and the Kyogen is quite different than the No. The Kyogen is about, usually there's not, the actors aren't wearing masks, and it's much more vernacular, satirical. In many ways, the main objective of the Kyogen is to produce laughter, which is to say, then followed by another No act. So the Kyogen is the edit between the 2 No acts. And that edit takes place by the laughter that's provoked not by any type of narrative, but by the entrance of the spectator into the performance. The autonomy of the play or the poem is broken the moment there's room for the audience to maneuver, but the room is established precisely by breaking down the reason that sutures the plot together and ultimately pacifies the audience. Now, of course, if we want to read Monday in terms of rational pathways and linear progression, and not in terms of laughter, emptiness, all we would need to do is stress the heavy-handed and tired forays into alcoholism and gun control. Those social issues saturated by an effete Japanese media that seem to drive the film. But to focus on these issues leads us down a dead end. Not just one populated by megalomaniacal media celebrities, which Sabu so wonderfully parodises. Many of you might notice some of these Japanese media pop personalities who he's playing off of, but also by paralyzing narratives of meaning that return us right to the most dystopian aspects of the 4 numbers established earlier. A futile cartoon about how evil, desperation, violence, chaos prevails over the good and the harmonious, or the equally futile cartoon of how good prevails over evil. Indeed, even Takagi himself seems to be struggling with his desire to understand things in such narrow terms. If only I didn't drink too much, it had to be the gun, and then that couldn't have happened to me. It wasn't me. But we must, I submit, resist following this red herring of morality. For when we do, Monday ends up as tedious and conservative as the media blowhards themselves. Rather, a return to zero and laughter is in order. But this time, to the time of zero, to the time of laughter. Monday is already a temporal category, one that straddles the week before and the week to come. Takagi wakes up Monday morning with not so much of a hangover as an amnesic spell. The first part of the film is told in flashback, triggers that take us to the funeral, to the cafe, to the bar, while the middle of the film catches up with itself by way of the media. The newspaper and TV indicate the exact time and the exact day of the week. And what's interesting with that last transition to the fore, with the shotgun shells, that takes us from the event that happened back to the hotel room. So the time is starting to move in a different direction. But unlike most films in which the real-time moment comes at the end, Monday saves the last third of the film for the future. Now we have flash-forwards that don't signal what is to come, but our desire and fear of what can come, presenting simultaneous, if not contradictory, endings. But this last section also presents a different temporality, a different logic of time. After the film catches up with itself, it proceeds to move ahead of itself. Monday rushes ahead of history. This different temporality does not understand past, present, future as discrete moments, one leading to the other, like so many days on a calendar. Rather, this is the time of zero. Zero is not real time, but unreal time. It's like the moment after the electrical surge when the digital clocks blink 000. Not a specific instant in time or a particular mode of time, but time, capital T. In this sense, zero is not outside of time, it is time. But if zero is our laughter, as I argued earlier, then by extension, our laughter is not outside of film, it is film. Now, if I want all of this math to add up to something, then what's left for me to do is to make a case for how our laughter is film, and to delineate what type of social relations our laughter flashes, and what this says about the present state of Japan and the world. That's a tall order, so I'll go right to the bottom of the bag and pull out one last clip, the Joker clip, and one that I trust you remember from the film. Characters get scared, but there's something, I think, unique about our laughter in Monday. And this is because when we cry and get scared in the theater, we usually do so because we are invested in and tied to the plot. But in the case of Monday, we are laughing at the character's laughter precisely because this laughter is severed from the plot of the film. We are not laughing at the story or the acting in the story as much as the singular act of laughing. There's a looking into the sun quality about laughing at laughing. It's a closed circuit, an identity of equal terms that calls into question the way value is produced. Modern value systems, from cinema to economics to politics, works by way of difference. One term is represented, granted value, by way of its differential relation to another term. A bowl of noodles equals that of a pack of cigarettes. Each costs the same amount of money. A bowl of noodles